In this step we're going to build the tube drive, which is going to go in the tail boom here. The tube drive is the long aluminum tube. It's not graphite, it's aluminum. You'll need the tube drive ends, the bearings, and the O-rings. We're going to need a few more special tools this time. You need the 2mm hex driver, some slow CA, a ruler at least 12 inches, some sort of tape, preferably something that comes off easily, and some spray lubricant. In my case, I'm using a silicone-based spray. First piece of this is to take the rubber O-rings and install them over the bearing cups. There's two positions on each cup. One O-ring slips over each one. At this point, there's no lubricant. If you look at these cups, they're a little bit different. The bearing presses in from one side and then seats. That's going to be relevant when we put it on the tube drive itself. Here we're going to get the tube drive ready to install these bearing holders over. If you look at the instructions, they specify that you shouldn't install these at equal distances on the tube. In fact, it specifies that one end should be 250 millimeters from the end of the tube, and the other should be 265. Well, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. I'm going to show you a very simple way, which is to take some tape and we're going to mark the inside of where this would fit, so that if you measure it from the outside to the end, as with the instructions indicate, it'll line up right. And what you need to do is, if you've got a metric ruler, you want to make one mark at 260 millimeters from the end. That's equal to 10 3/16 of an inch. And then on the other end, you want to mark it 275 millimeters, which is equal to 10 13/16. That's going to make the bearing cups, when they slide on, the distance from the face, the outside face, to the end of the tube will match what's in the instructions. Okay, I've put a very small amount of CA on the entire circumference of the tube, just in front of the tape. You're going to take the bearing cup and decide which way you're going to put it on. I'm going to put it on with the cup on the inside. Take the bearing, slide it over, push it up against the blue tape, and basically it'll dry there. We're going to do the other end, again making sure that the bearings are aligned in the same direction. So on this side, instead of the cup going on first, the open bearing is going to go on. Just going to push it up against the tape, and I'm going to let these dry for about an hour. The CA needs to set up because we're going to be pushing on these in the next step. Just a note about this little procedure here. The reason these aren't at equidistant distances from the end is to prevent a resonance from being set up in the tube drive while it's running. By making them slightly different distances from each end and from each other, it'll prevent that. You also want to clean the tube drive and the inside of the bearings with some sort of solvent, just to make sure you got a really good seal on the adhesive. And then after it sets up for a few minutes, I'm going to pull the tape off, and we'll be set to put the ends on. Now we can install the tube drive ends. Tube drive ends are sort of triangular shaped. They have 3 threaded holes in them. If you look at the end of the tube drive, it also has 3 holes. None of these holes are aligned with each other, so you need to make sure you turn the tube drive in the proper orientation to fit. It'll just slide right into the tube drive. You line up the holes, and then you're going to take 3 of the small M2 socket head bolts, thread into these 3 holes using blue thread lock. You're going to want to do the same thing on both ends of this. When the ends are done, they'll look like this. You want to make sure you clean all the threads really well and use plenty of blue thread lock on them. Again, be careful not to cross thread them, and don't over tighten them, because you could strip them, and then that would be a bad thing. These are going to be inside the tail boom and not really serviceable. Okay, now we can put this in the tail boom. Before we slide this into the tail boom, I want to show you what you're engaging into. If you look at the inside of the drive gears, this is the one on the rear transmission. The one on the front transmission is the same. It's a triangular shaped plastic opening. That's what the end has to fit into. So when the tube drive goes into the tail boom, you're going to want to push it in until it engages inside that opening, which is inside this gear. So it's inside here. When we're pushing the tube drive in, it's going to be some friction, but ultimately we're going to engage it into this gear. Before we push the tube drive in, you want to take some lubricant and insert in the tail boom. Again, I'm going to use this silicone-based spray. Spray some in the end of the boom, and then we're just going to take the tube and push it in. It doesn't matter which end of the tube drive you push in. I'm going to push in the end that pushes the bearings against the inside of the cup. They're in there well enough that it's not going to matter. Simply slide it in. They'll slide right in with the lubricant on them. Push this in, and you're going to, again, you're trying to seat it in the end of the gear here, so you're going to have to move it around until it seats, and you'll hear it seat. And now when you turn the gear, you're turning the tube. And this is the right amount of tube drive to see extended out. All right, once the tube drive's inserted in the boom and it's properly engaged with the gears, we're ready to go on to the next step, which is to finish assembly of the tail boom.